The VapePassion Show, episode 24. Alright, welcome back to the show. So, this week I have some family in town visiting to celebrate some July birthdays. So, it's been pretty busy, but a lot of fun. We went swimming on Friday in some freezing cold water at the motel my family was staying at. I think they filled it up with a garden hose because that's the coldest pool I've ever been in. It was absolutely freezing. And that's what they had hanging up on the pool gate was a garden hose, so I'm pretty sure that's what they used. We actually had to take our daughter out of the pool because she was shivering after about 10 minutes, but she still had fun. And then yesterday, Saturday, we celebrated all the July birthdays with a big party and a bunch of Mexican food, and it was really good. So some ice cream cake. I had a lot of fun. My family, they're all leaving today, so they're on their way back to Seattle now. But so life is getting back to normal. So I didn't get any new products last week, but I did get a bunch of concentrates, flavorings, whole bunch of flavors here. It's only going to make 3 different e-juices, but you know, a lot of these I could actually make single flavor e-juices if I want. And it's funny because in last week's episode I mentioned a flavor called bilberry, and the guy who was talking about it said that it smells like goat's butthole. And what I didn't realize is that I actually had some on the way, because I just made an order based on an e-juice that I wanted to make, and bilberry happened to be an ingredient. I wasn't really thinking about it, so I have some, and I'm gonna see if it actually smells like goat's butthole. So let's open that up. Here we go, bilberry right there. So if you don't know what bilberry is, it's like a type of blueberry, I'm pretty sure. Well, opening it up, it smells like blueberries. I mean, just the wrapper. I haven't actually opened up the container yet. I see. It is a blueberry, but it's kind of weird. I don't think it smells like butthole, but I don't know what that guy's saying, what he's talking about. I did see some other people in that thread, though, saying that bilberry is a weird flavor. So maybe just some people get a different flavor. It doesn't smell bad to me.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Okay, so a really quick interruption. I'm actually inserting this into the show after having recorded it. So I looked up bilberry, and it turns out that it is related to the blueberry family, but it's distinctly different. So it's not really a blueberry taste or smell. And also, I had my wife smell it, and she said it smells like dirty feet, like stinky feet. And when I did some more searches on bilberry flavor concentrate, a lot of people were saying the same thing, like it smells like feet or wet socks or something like that. So I guess a lot of people do say that it stinks, and it's just me that's not really getting that smell out of it. It does have a bit of a weird smell to it, though. Alright, so let's get back to where I left off. Alright, anyway, so let's jump into some of the stories to talk about this week. So first I'm going to start off with some advocacy regulation laws, government type stuff. So first let's talk about the Kasan newsletter. They just released their quarterly newsletter, I believe. And the first thing I want to talk about is their section it's titled Misinformation. So usually they reserve this section for deliberate misinformation campaigns which are intended to confuse the public and policymakers about the risks associated with vaping. But this time they're dedicating it to misinformation that's happening within the vaping community, specifically misleading people to believe that HR 2058 is a lost cause and should not be promoted. So they say, on the contrary, HR 2058 continues to gain co-sponsors and is part of a long-term effort to change the 2007 predicate date applied to new tobacco products by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. And now it does have a Democrat on here, so it's considered a bipartisan bill. And although not specifically addressed by this legislation, urging support for this bill is important in messaging efforts to change the hearts and minds in Congress about the critical need to develop appropriate regulation for vapor products. They say that it's unlikely that HR 2058 will advance through the process this year, but it's wildly inaccurate and irresponsible to suggest that support for this bill is a lost cause. The truth is that support for this legislation will carry over into 2017 when the language is reintroduced and renumbered. And they mention that they're not putting all their eggs in one basket, so they're not just only supporting HR 2058, they're also continuing to support the Cole-Bishop Amendment. They also have a section in their newsletter titled FDA Deeming Rumors. They say there are 3 very important things that are happening on August 8th, which is the effective date of deeming regulations. So 1, there will be no new products on the market after August 8th. That is the deadline for PMTAs for any product. 2, online retailers will be required to use some sort of age verification process in order to prevent sales to minors through the mail. And that could include a signature on delivery service, which would be provided for a fee by major carriers like FedEx and UPS. And with that signature on delivery service, that is going to mean for any companies who use that service, prices are going to go up, which are going to be carried onto the consumer. So you could expect to start paying some more fees for your products or higher costs for your products. And that will be happening in all 50 states. And another downfall of that signature on delivery service is that these delivery services were originally developed to accommodate alcohol shipments. They're not really designed for 18 and up, and that means that anyone under the age of 21 won't be able to make online purchases for any company using the sign-on delivery services. And the last thing that Kassam mentions here is that it's important to point out the federal government now considers vapor products to be tobacco, and states will need to update their definitions of tobacco in the various parts of their code on their own. So changing the federal definition of tobacco doesn't automatically change the definition for states. So lots of interesting information there from CASA. They have a really good quarterly newsletter. Okay, and then I got this email from the FDA Center for Tobacco Products. They are holding a live Q&A webinar on the 13th. This webinar is titled, How Can My Business Comply? So if you are a tobacco product manufacturer, importer, or vape shop, and you have questions about what the new rules mean for your business and what steps you need to take to comply, that's what this webinar is for. I'm not any of those, but I do plan to go back and watch it because it could be interesting to see what they say. But if it's anything like any of their previous webinars, it's probably going to be useless. So by the time you watch or listen to this show, it might be too late to interact with the live Q&A, but you can go back and watch it. They republish their webinars on their website, I believe. Okay, and then I saw this article on rstreet.org, and it's titled Free Market Groups to Energy and Commerce Committee move quickly to pass HR 2058. So rstreet.org and various other conservative and libertarian think tanks got together and crafted this letter that's going to the chairman, Fred S. Upton. He's a Republican U.S. representative from Michigan's 6th Congressional District. They also sent it to Ranking Member Frank Pallone Jr., who's a Democrat, for New Jersey's 6th Congressional District, and members of the Energy and Commerce Committee. They're saying, on behalf of the undersigned, we urge you to move quickly to pass legislation, HR 2058, that would move the grandfather date for the FDA's regulation of nicotine delivery products from February 15, 2007 to the date when the new rules take effect. They're urging to pass this immediately because time is of the essence to ensure smokers can continue to have access to life-saving tobacco alternatives. They mention that without the change, the FDA's proposed rules won't reduce smoking, but it will in fact increase it, and will likely see a vapor underground for these products that will further deteriorate consumer safety. So in addition to R Street Institute, there are 11 other organizations here who have signed this letter. All of them appear to be pretty big conservative and libertarian organizations. So I suppose that's some good news. I'm not saying that it's bad to have conservative and libertarian think tanks on your side, but some of these guys are known to be a little bit extreme. So in some cases, they aren't taken so seriously. But I think it's good to have these people on our side. Alright, so now let's talk about some new products. I don't always see a lot of products that I'm really interested in. I mean, there's a lot of good products on the market that I would like to have, but none that I'm really, really excited about. But recently, two came on the market that I would really like to have, and that would be the Goon RDA and the K-Fun 5. So for the Goon RDA, I've been seeing some really good reviews for this. It's a great looking RDA with a deep juice well, lots of airflow, but what people really seem to like about it is how coils are clamped onto the post using flat plates, which lets you easily add any size of coil onto the deck. So homeboy Josh, who's really big into coil building, has said that this is the best deck on the market for building on, especially for dual coils. Grim Green loves it and says that it's a great vape and is worth the learning curve to build on it. And you can get it the lowest priced model for $60 for the basic stainless steel version, or you can go up and get the high cost model, which is titanium, for $130. It looks really good. And then the K-Fun 5, that one is a product that everyone is talking about how amazing the flavor is. People are saying it's on par with the previous versions of the K-Fun, more specifically the Mini V3, because everyone seemed to hate the V4. But the V5 has more and better airflow control, and the build deck is bigger than the V3. Grim Green, Wayne from DIY or Die Vaping, and Mark Vapenfagan have all said how awesome the tank is. The only drawback is that it's so expensive at $120, but everyone is saying that it's worth it. Okay, now let's talk about some science and research stuff. So I came across this article on webmd.com. They are talking about a recent study. This one is titled E-cigs may damage cells in mouth. So researchers from the University of California, Los Angeles found that toxic substances and nanoparticles in e-cigarette vapor caused 85% of tested cells to die. They tested this in a laboratory on cultured cells. They said, based on these results, that it's possible that substances can kill the top layer of skin cells in the oral cavity. They don't know yet if that translates to humans, but they do plan to do a human study to confirm their findings. They say that if it is confirmed, that e-cigarettes could increase users' risk of oral disease. So we don't have any data that suggests that's true yet, but we'll just have to wait and see how that one works out. Okay, and in some other really good news, Cancer Research UK and Public Health England put out a joint statement basically saying that vaping is better than smoking. They say, we all agree that e-cigarettes are significantly less harmful than smoking. And they point out here that 1 in 2 lifelong smokers die from their addiction, and that all the evidence we currently have suggests that health risks posed by e-cigarettes are relatively small by comparison, although they say that they do plan to continue studying long-term effects. They say that the public health opportunity here is in helping smokers to quit, so they encourage smokers to try vaping, and also encourage vapers to stop smoking tobacco completely. So this joint statement includes big organizations in the UK, health organizations like Public Health England, British Lung Foundation, Royal College of Physicians, the UK Centre for Tobacco and Alcohol Studies, and a bunch of other really big health organizations in the UK. So it's really good to have those guys on the side of vaping. Okay, so now let's just talk about some articles that I came across. So this first one is on greatest.com. It's titled, Why I'm Deliberately Taking Up an E-Cigarette Habit. So the writer of this article, he is a current smoker, but he only smokes on the weekends when he drinks. But he decided after a particularly tobacco-heavy Friday night that he was going to start smoking e-cigarettes in hopes of cutting back on real cigarettes. He mentions here that he doesn't really feel that about 1 pack per month isn't that big of a deal, but why not switch to e-cigs and reduce the harm while still getting the same nicotine high? So quitting isn't really his goal, but replacing it with electronic cigarettes to reduce the harm is the goal. So he mentions that he's done quite a bit of research on deciding on whether or not it's safe. For example, how regular cigarettes have 4,000 chemicals and toxins in them, at least 69 of them are known carcinogens, while on the other hand, e-cigarette vapor only contains about 4 ingredients: water, nicotine, glycerin, and PG, and maybe some flavoring. And he also mentions the Public Health England survey that shows that e-cigarettes are 95% less harmful than tobacco cigarettes. So he has done his research and decided to move ahead. So his e-cigarette of choice was the Pax Juul. His first impression is that as a drug, it's really good. The nicotine felt stronger than a cigarette, often to the point that his knees would wobble and he'd have to sit down. He says the Juul gets you high. He also says that in every single other way, vaping is a superior experience to smoking. It doesn't make his clothes and breath stink, there's no ash, it's less wasteful, and it's cheaper. And it's also less offensive to the people around him. And to top it all off, the nicotine comes in insanely delicious flavors like creme brulee. After a week of using the Pax Juul, he decided to contact the CEO of Juul, James Monsees, to hear his side of the story. James said that they have no intention of making a nicotine cessation product of any sort, and that if you're considering the shift to electronic cigarettes as quitting, you're not quitting smoking. If that's your goal, use a pharmaceutical product that's intended and approved for those purposes. So it's really unfortunate that they're creating a product for only recreational use and trying to deliberately stay away from the whole cessation idea of electronic cigarettes. But on the other hand, that could be a business and legal decision that's keeping their product out of the eyes of the FDA as it relates to pharmaceutical products. Anyways, he goes on to say that their intention is to make the absolute best nicotine product on the market. So going back to the writer, he says, as for his own experiment with the product, the 2-week mark was when he started to get worried, and that's because with an electronic cigarette, it's always there whenever you want to take a puff. So he's found himself smoking or vaping at times when he otherwise wouldn't. For example, when he's sitting on his couch at home, when he's just walking between buildings, or on a late night bathroom break. He's just vaping all the time, and he never did that with cigarettes. So he says the 2 weeks he gave himself to try e-cigarettes has come to a close, and now he's asking himself if he really needs this new habit. He says for now he's still using electronic cigarettes and has totally stopped smoking altogether, so he'd say he'd accomplished his goal. So I think that's pretty good, and I don't think the guy has anything to worry about. Vaping is way safer than smoking, and there's no proof that even regular constant use is dangerous for us. So even if he is using it all the time when he normally wouldn't be smoking, isn't really anything to be worried about. And even if it has only been 2 weeks, he has mentioned that he's totally stopped smoking, so I think it's another really good example of how people can use e-cigs to quit smoking right away. Okay, so this next one is on domainnamewire.com. It's titled Vape Magazine Nailed for Reverse Domain Name Hijacking. So I didn't even know this was a thing, but Vape Magazine, they're the guys who have a magazine in the stores like Barnes & Noble. They launched their magazine in 2012 and launched a website that same year at vapenewsmagazine.com. Well, vapemagazine.com, the domain they wanted to own, was registered a year before they even started business in 2011. They tried to buy it in 2014, but were turned down, so they decided to take Vape Magazine, the owners of vapemagazine.com, to court. The panel who reviewed the case found them to have engaged in reverse domain name hijacking for the domain because that domain existed before they had even started. They had no right to that domain. They shouldn't have even put this case through. So that's pretty dirty of Vape Magazine to do, the actual publishing magazine. And I wonder if that makes them, if they have to suffer any kind of consequences of doing a bad faith reverse domain name hijacking. I always wondered why their domain name was vapenewsmagazine.com. So now we know. Alright, let's get into the tips and tricks section of the show. This first one here was a post on Reddit. It's titled, "Being Absent-Minded and High Amperage Batteries Don't Mix." So the guy who published this post, he is not new to vaping. He's been vaping for at least 2 years now, he says, and he is well aware of battery safety and safe battery management. But over the past 2 years, he's gotten a little bit lazy about safety and more casual. So he dropped his spare battery, into his pocket while he was at work, and he forgot it was there. Well, he also seemed to have had his keys in his pocket, and the keys touched the negative and positive contacts, and it caused a short. The battery exploded in his pocket and caused some pretty severe burns on his legs, or on one of his legs. He said he was at work squatting down, running a sander on a deck, when all of a sudden he heard a violent pop and immediate burning as the battery vented onto his right thigh. And then after about 3 seconds of venting, a second more powerful explosion blew the seams on the right leg of his pants. He didn't know how bad the burn was, but there was an intense pain, and he knew it was pretty bad because he was shaking and shivering. So if you're listening to the podcast, I'll put a link in the show notes so that you can see some of these images if that's something you want to see. They're pretty gruesome, or you can also check out my show on YouTube if you want to look at the pictures. You can see his leg is pretty burnt up here. He says cleaning and debriding the wound was some of the worst pain he's ever experienced in his life, and he had to lay there and watch sheets of skin over square foot being removed from his body. After 10 days, sheets of burned skin are starting to come off, but it's not as painful anymore, so it's starting to look better. And if you see in the picture here, there's this black spot right in the middle. Well, at day 20, that black spot falls out. It's appears to be like a plug of soot and proteins, and left a really deep hole in the back of his thigh. So pretty scary, and just a really good reminder that even as an experienced vapor, it's something that you can't take for granted. You have to be really cautious with how you keep your extra batteries laying around. And it's pretty silly too, because you can get a battery case for like 55 cents from a website like Illume.com. And now this guy has to go through all of this pain and probably thousands of dollars in medical bills simply because it was too much of an inconvenience to pick up a 50-cent battery case. Alright, moving on. So this next one I came across on ecigaretteforum.com. This one's titled, "What's the cheapest way to vape?" So basically this guy got laid off from his job, so all of his expenses now need to go to food and rent, and his last paycheck can't go to vaping at all, or at least not much of it. So he's asking for some tips on how he can continue to vape without spending a whole lot of money. So there's some good tips here, mainly just getting into DIY. It's the cheapest thing you can do in order to keep vaping. This person mentions here that you shouldn't get cheap ingredients, because even the best ingredients are cheap enough. You can get a good quality VG from Amazon, and you can get flavors from a ton of different places, and you only need a few flavors really to get started. This guy says that he loves the liquid that he makes, and it costs him less than $6 to make 100 mils. Although, like this other poster mentions, is that DIY is cheaper in the long run. It does have its share of startup costs, and that includes things like buying the PG, VG, nicotine, the syringes, the flavorings, and the new bottles. But like I mentioned in one of my previous shows, I added all of that up, at least really basic starter kit. You can get all of that for about $30, so it's pretty cheap to get started. And quite a few people here are actually mentioning that one of the best ways to go really cheap is just to buy straight VG and a little bit of nicotine and vape it unflavored, because VG, even though it's considered flavorless, it does have a slightly sweet taste, so it's not exactly flavorless. As I'm scrolling through this thread, I see that there's a lot of people actually saying that flavorless is pretty good, and a couple people here say that every few days, if they get bored of vaping flavorless, they'll just add a drop of flavor to the tank. And this guy, Jeffro2700, he mentions that you can get 1,000 milliliters of nicotine for about $30 with shipping from liquid nicotine wholesalers, and they even send you some test results to show you that the product is pure. And 1,000 mils of nicotine, that's going to last you quite a while. I think that vaping VG, just plain VGs, is a really good idea, and I've actually done it before, because I used to vape VG just to get the flavoring out of my cotton so that I could put a new flavor on it. I never thought about just switching entirely to VG, but I think that's a really good idea for anyone who doesn't have the funds to keep buying e-juice. And making DIY e-juice doesn't have to be expensive either. There are a lot of recipes online where, there are like 10 different flavor concentrates, but you don't really need to go that crazy, at least not to get started. I looked up a couple of threads on Reddit for single and double flavor e-juice recipes, and a lot of people are recommending Flavor West concentrates because I guess their single flavors are really good. This person recommends cinnamon roll, yellow cake, green apple, orange, lemonade, raspberries. So those are all really good ones to get started with if you just want to try a single flavor recipe. And you can get a really small bottle of concentrate which will last a while. I don't know, maybe 15, 20 bottles of e-juice, of 30 ml bottles of e-juice for about $3. So it's really cheap to get started. This person points out that some brands, like the Flavor Apprentice for example, you might want to start at about 10% flavoring because different companies have different concentrations, and because of that you should start making your e-juices in small batches, like 5mm bottles if possible, to see how it tastes before you start making a larger bottle. But a lot of people say they rarely go above 8%. People tend to stick around 6% or 11%, so you'll just have to play around with it. And another good tip here for people just getting into DIY, or at least if you want to figure out if it's something that you're going to enjoy doing or want to do, is to look up your favorite e-juice, see if there's a clone for it, and just buy the ingredients to make that one, because then you'll know that it's at least a flavor that you're going to enjoy vaping. And then if it turns out that DIY is something that you like doing, you can go look for other different types of recipes. And there are a lot of really good 2-flavor recipes here too, like this one is vanilla custard and French vanilla, both from Compella Flavors. Here's one with Bavarian cream and dragon fruit, another one with butter rum and vanilla custard. Here's a simple custard with vanilla custard and cheesecake. So yeah, some really good flavors here, which are good if you're a beginner or if you're just trying to save some money. Okay, now while we're on the topic of DIY e-juice, I want to mention this new video from New Amsterdam Vape. He created a new video titled Complete Beginner's Guide to Making E-Liquid. So he created a video not too long ago, well, maybe a year or so ago, on the same subject, but it got a little bit out of date. Things have changed. So he redid the whole video, and it's a really high quality video. It's 34 minutes long, and it covers pretty much everything you need to know about getting started in DIY e-juice. There are a lot of really great graphics that keep you interested the whole way through, and the guy has a voice of like a professional commercial voiceover actor. It's really interesting.
This is New Amsterdam Vape, and this video is the complete beginner's guide to making e-liquid.
I don't actually watch videos. I usually run them in the background and just listen to them, but I couldn't help but watch this whole thing through. And he also put a lot of timestamps in the video description so that you can jump ahead to any section you're interested in. So if DIY is something you're looking into getting into, I really recommend watching that one. Alright, now next I want to talk about this article on notechie.com. It's titled 4 Simple Hacks That Will Turbocharge Your E-Cigarette Experience. So this isn't the greatest article. I think it's not even written by someone that really knows a lot about vaping, I don't think. But it did have some pretty good tips here that I liked. The first one here is when you're cleaning out your tank or your RDAs or atomizers, that you use like a steel basket, a sieve, like a strainer that you would use in the kitchen. And you want to use a really fine mesh. That way you don't lose any of your components down the drain. And I think this is a really good tip because actually I just recently lost the 510 pin to my Mutation X V3 because I was cleaning it. I didn't realize that the pin came out when I was cleaning it in the ultrasonic cleaner. The ultrasonic cleaner has a basket, but the holes, I guess, are big enough to where parts could fall through, so I lost that. I can't find it. I'm pretty sure it's in the drain, but I think that's a really good tip. The next one here is to clean your mods with ketchup, in particular copper mods. So if you have a copper mod, ketchup has been known to be a great way of polishing copper. So all you need to do is just rub the ketchup into the copper and then rinse it off with water and let it air dry. And another good tip here is to mix different flavors. So you don't actually have to get into DIY e-juice to mix up different e-liquids to get a really good flavor. I've heard of a lot of people actually mixing pre-mixed e-liquids that they already own just to see what it would taste like, and then finding that they actually end up with a really good e-juice. So if you're looking to experiment with some of your flavorings, consider giving that a shot. Okay, moving on. So this next topic I came across on the DIY e-juice subreddit. It's titled TFA flavorants that contain vomit odor in their mixture. I guess there's a chemical that's in some flavors. This one particularly calls out the Flavor Apprentice's flavorings, and it's a chemical called butyric acid. And to some people who are sensitive to this chemical, they get the flavor or smell of vomit. And if you look up butyric acid, it's actually a chemical that exists in real vomit. That's what gives vomit the smell that it has. So anyone who's sensitive to that ingredient, to that chemical, can really smell it in their e-juice. So anyway, this guy ran a script on the MSDS listings for butyric acid on the Flavor Apprentice website and came back with a list of flavors here. If you are sensitive to that ingredient, check out this list so that you know not to buy it or use it in any of your e-juices. And when I was doing some research on this ingredient, it looks like a lot of American chocolate companies actually use this in their foods. Like Hershey's, Nestle, and Cadbury, they all use it in their chocolates. Some people say that they can actually taste vomit in those chocolates. I'm a big fan of Cadbury eggs and Hershey chocolates, and I've never tasted it, so I guess I'm not sensitive at all. But it's probably in pretty low concentrations normally used. People say if you do use it in high concentrations, that's when you'll really start to taste it. And they say that it tastes like vomit or rancid dairy products. So if you are using a butyric acid containing flavor in any of your e-juices, make sure you start low. That way you don't get that sour milk aftertaste in your juice. Low being around 1 or 2%. I was actually kind of interested in trying an e-juice that has butyric acid in it to see if I would notice it, but I don't have any flavorings that have it, so it's really not in a whole lot of flavors. Okay, and this last topic here I want to talk about is another thread on Reddit. This is in the Vaping 101 subreddit. This person asks, if all other factors are equal, what will the differences be between a contact coil and a spaced coil? So there were only 2 responses here. This person mentions that in his experience, spaced coils tend to heat up a little quicker and also usually have a slighter higher resistance due to a little more wire being used due to the spacing. He gets a better flavor off of non-spaced coils, but he says that's completely subjective. And another person added to that saying that contact coils focus heat in the center of the coil first, then spread it out with the center mostly being the hottest, while spaced coils will heat more evenly. So I wanted to add something that I've mentioned in a previous show, and that's that research has actually shown that dry burning your coils affects the structure of the metal and may lead to the production of potentially hazardous particles. Those particles appear to be very minimal, but chemists and Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos, who is a pretty big researcher, a pro-vaping researcher, suggest that you don't dry burn your coils. And the reason I bring that up is because the main reason we dry burn our coils is to straighten it out so that it fires evenly. And that's only on contact coils. If you do spaced coils, they fire evenly throughout, and you don't need to do any kind of positioning, and you don't need to dry burn the coil to straighten it. So that's why when I build my own coils, I only always do spaced coils. Okay, so that's going to do it for this episode. You'll find show notes for the show on VapePassion.com, episode 24. If you want to support the show, consider donating to my Patreon page at patreon.com/VapePassion. Even just $1 a month helps keep the show going. You can follow me on Twitter at VapePassion, and I'm also on Facebook. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. If you're listening to the podcast, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm at VapePassion. And like always, you can email me with questions or comments at vapepassion.com, or just leave a comment on one of my YouTube videos and I'll get back to you. So that's it, and I hope to see you again next week.